Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. Cade Kennedy with you alongside Tyler Riggs. It is not a Tuesday when we normally do be doing the college football playoff rankings reaction. It is a Wednesday, but either way, Tyler, had that day where we were both busy, but now we can finally get in here and talk about this thing. As always, before we fully get into it, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, all those great things. Only takes a moment of your time. We do sincerely appreciate it. But Tyler, we had some a little bit of talking before we started this thing. I know you've got your points to be made here. And usually I try to give my opinion first, but I'm just going to let you have the floor on this one.
All right. So look, we talked about this last week. Oregon, Ohio State 1-2. Texas, people are complaining. I think Texas 3 is fine. No worries there. Yes, they lost to Georgia. That's fine. They're okay. Texas is number 3. That defense is legit. Then we get to the problems. I know Penn State has only lost to Ohio State, but Kate, outside of that game, who has Penn State beat?
Illinois?
Nobody. Nobody. No. Nobody, because Illinois is bad. All right? So how in God's green earth do they pole vault Indiana? Indiana should be the number 4 team in these rankings.
I agree. It's one that I think that was one of the big things I saw with people. I'll have my piece when we get down a little bit lower in the line, but Indiana, just my goodness, still a great season. And the thing that I don't know if I want to jump on it yet or not, but Indiana should be number 4. You can make the argument, put them at 3. But like you said, I'm fine with Texas being 3. They've had the eye test. They've blown out people they should. I'm fine with that. But Indiana, it's only a 1 spot difference, but just come on and make the push.
Yeah, I mean, because you're setting up for the scenario that if Indiana doesn't either lose close or doesn't beat Ohio State, right? Let's say lose by 2 touchdowns. It feels like the committee is going to shove them out of the top 12, which is a travesty. Yes. A travesty. Because they would have the same resume Penn State does, and Penn State would still somehow be in the top 5.
Yeah.
But that's for a different day. 6, BYU. Personally, I'd put ahead Penn State. I'd have Penn State 6, BYU, Indiana 4 and 5 respectively there. So that's then where I get to the Penn State argument. And, made the case for Notre Dame in the past. Them, Tennessee, Penn State. I'd probably put Tennessee, ahead of Penn State, Notre Dame. Miami, here's the question I had with Miami. I saw people outraging over this, that, they were ahead of Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia. That might be a fair question. Are we at the point, Cade, where Miami is a little bit more of a paper champ at this point? Like, what do you do with Miami here? Do you think that's a fair ranking for them?
Miami, you have to pray that they win the conference, because honestly, why not put SMU in front of Miami? SMU has the better schedule here. Their 1 loss is to BYU. Miami's is to Georgia Tech. And then if you want to eye test this thing even, you could say, SMU was able to beat up Pitt when we all thought Pitt was a good team. It turns out they're not as good as we thought they were, unfortunately for them. But SMU has had some of those wins. Keep in mind what SMU's had to go through this season. Had the quarterback change at the beginning of the year. Preston Stone, remember when we talked about him back in August? He's nowhere to be found. It's the Ken Jennings show. RJ Maryland, amazing tight end for SMU. Now he's out for the season. You got to remember, SMU is doing everything they're doing without their 2 best players that we all thought at the beginning of the year. That SMU, if you would have told me, hey, Preston Stone's going to get benched for not playing up to expectation, RJ Maryland's out 5 games, 6 games into the season. SMU, if you tell me that, that's more impressive than Miami that dodged a bullet, and then got ran over by the rambling wreck of Georgia Tech. I mean, my goodness, this is a Miami team, and this is what I've been trying to say. And I got this out during Fraud Alert last week, and I got some of it out of my system, but I haven't gotten all of it out. Even if Miami goes, a 2-loss Miami team, they should be launched out of the top 15, maybe even the top 20. There's a point in time where the eye test becomes an actual metric and not something we use to justify a team we don't like. But I think it absolutely would be deserved for Miami.
Well, and you look at the resumes to the SMU point here, who, by the way, got bumped down a spot to 14 this week. So they're on the outside completely right now, despite leading the conference, which makes no
Absolutely.
sense. SMU has the same big win that you could say Miami has over Louisville, and has one where they absolutely dismantled a Pitt team that at the time was undefeated, which Miami doesn't have, and they've got the better loss. Miami lost to Georgia Tech, who at times has been pesky, but is not really a great team. SMU's only loss is to your number 6 team in the rankings by 3.
Absolutely.
And that was a home loss for SMU. Get it, tough, but it's still a team that has only lost to an undefeated squad. I don't make sense of that at all. I really don't. The AP's not much better, right? AP's got SMU at 14 as well. So that doesn't make sense. I don't get the eye test part of what you're seeing with SMU that does not equate to Miami, except for Cam Ward. Now,
Yeah.
to the AP's credit, they've got Miami at 12, so it's a lot closer, right? They're
Yeah.
basically calling that more of a toss up. But number 9 makes no sense. I completely understand why Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia fans are upset. You should not be behind Miami. Yes, you've got an extra loss compared to Miami, but you have a far better resume. And for that matter, Boise State and SMU does. I'd put Miami at 14 right now.
Yeah, I would almost consider putting A&M over them as well, though, honestly.
Yeah,
Like,
maybe Kansas State, Colorado. They're in
yeah,
that
yeah,
conference.
maybe, I hate playing this game because the more and more I look down that list, it gets to like Wazoo, and then it's like, okay, but hear me out. Is where it feels like we'd have to stop at Louisville because they actually beat Louisville. Like, you could put the fact that we can put 9-1 Miami at 18 and neither of us would have a problem with that just says a lot about where Miami is right now. And that's not even a knock on Cam Ward, who is trying his darndest to win this thing, but like everyone else is not on that defensive side of the ball, especially. But Tyler, I think the other big point to get to here, and this is something I saw on social media today, which granted, social media, not always the greatest, the brightest minds in college football we're talking about
What?
here.
You're kidding me.
I know. It's, believe it or not, people who want Nick Saban fired sometimes when he went 11-1 and not 15-0 in an 11 game span. Like, I know, but Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia, I think 9, 10, and 11 for them would be perfect. They're all 2-loss teams. They're all super talented. We all know what they're capable of. They're all playoff caliber teams. Everyone has seen that, but they're all kind of beating each other up. And that's why I think they're perfectly fine there towards the bottom of the playoff. You're going to have to earn your way back in because you've beat each other up. And I've seen some SEC people try to pull the argument on them. Well, they beat Miami, they beat Notre Dame, they beat Indiana. Why are they behind them? This is not a who the best team is in college football in terms of strength. If it was, why would we even play the season? We just crown Alabama or Georgia the champion every year since 2010. Like, we wouldn't even have the season. Why would we even play the games then? But at the same...
And games have to matter, right?
Exactly.
Wins have to matter, losses have to matter.
Exactly. And I'm not trying to do this to knock them all down because, I could see where they're coming from, that the SEC has not had a year like this in a long time where Alabama has 2 losses going to November, where Georgia looks shaky, where Ole Miss is able to manhandle Georgia and look like a competent team, and then also has that loss to Kentucky they have to deal with. This is not normal in the SEC. You've got your 2, powers that will meet in Atlanta at the end of the year, and we're going to settle it. But instead, we're looking at, the funny 8-way tie scenario that is still a real thing somehow, which, that'll go away eventually because you can't count on Auburn to do anything. But either way, that's the main spiel I've got there looking on down the list. Not a whole lot else I'm going to get mad at. K-State's over Colorado, which is correct. Louisville's over Clemson, which is correct. South Carolina's over LSU, which is technically not correct, but I'm also not mad because I think South Carolina should have beaten LSU, if not for some possible referee black magic that happened to that game. But the one that gets me, and I'm going to keep harping about it, why is Army 24? What did does this committee hate America, Tyler? Let's be on. Let's have an honest conversation.
They do. They may be a commie committee. We may be in a commie committee.
It's just I don't get what I know what Army has to do. They have to beat Notre Dame, but why does a 9-0 Army have to beat Notre Dame to get some respect? You're
Well, and
nine
here's
and
the
zero.
problem with that, Cade. Not to cut you off, but here's the problem with that. Even if Army beats Notre Dame, you know what's going to happen. Despite Notre Dame being inside the top 10, is what will happen if Army beats Notre Dame is that the committee will simply go, see, this is the Notre Dame team that lost to Northern Illinois. Our eyes did not deceive us. Army gets some credit, but ultimately, maybe they get inside the top 20. This
Yeah,
is not going to be an Army team that will get in based off merit. Their only hope is that Boise State trips up. That's
absolutely.
their only hope. Because remember, and I think people forget about this, the Georgia fans that bellyache and the Bama fans and Ole Miss fans, you're not guaranteed to be in the top 12, even if you're ranked inside the top 12 when it comes to the playoff, because it is the
Absolutely.
top four uh, champions get the first buys. And that could be, a Colorado team, let's say, that finishes the season 15th, but they're the Big 12 champion. All of a sudden, they essentially steal a spot, right? They knock off a BYU. Then you've got to have the discussion where BYU maybe gets left out. I mean, there's all these scenarios where you could have a team crash the party, so to speak. So I think fans got to remember that. And if you're belly aching about, well, Georgia, we deserve to be in because we've got that win over Texas and this and that, go win your conference. That's the only guarantee you are granted as a Power Four team, right? Other than that, if you're belly aching about not being inside the Big 12 or the top 12, take care of your conference. Take care of your conference. Yeah, you're playing in the SEC. We get it. It's tough. But at the same time, that's what you signed up for, to have the ability to be a two-loss team and still say, hey, we deserve to be in. No other conference outside the Big Ten gets that. Are we in agreement with that? Like, the ACC is not going to get that benefit.
Absolutely.
The Big 12 most likely won't get that benefit.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on that. I think, the SEC and the Big Ten, as much as Big 12 and ACC fans don't like what I'm about to say, they are the two power conferences for a reason.
Yeah,
There's the power
yeah.
two, and then there's the other power two, if we're being honest here. Where, you already saw I don't want to say the spin machine, but it felt like it almost today on Pat McAfee, where you had Heather Dinich come in and say, well, actually, a 3-loss SEC team would not be counted out. And it's like, well, that depends on what kind of year we're having. I don't want to say that about this climate right now when you've got 9 other teams that have 1 loss, one of which is Miami, who we've already talked about. But you've got Boise and SMU in that race as well, where it's just, I don't want to already start calling, hey, if Georgia loses to Tennessee, all they need to do is still go 9-3, and we might put them in at the 11 spot, because then that opens up Pandora's box for the future. You set a deadly precedent almost by doing that in year 1 of this format.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about the Danish comment, and I respect her analysis for the most part. But the funny thing about that comment is that the only way a 3-loss SEC team is considered is probably one that does not make the SEC title game. Because if it's an A&M, their only hope first they'd have to beat Texas.
Yeah.
Okay. Then they'd have to hope Tennessee wins out, and that you lose, um, or you'd have to lose a tight game to Tennessee, and then you'd maybe talk about a 3-loss Texas A&M team, right? Because your losses still wouldn't be the best. You lost to Notre Dame, who's proven to be good, but lost to NIU. You lost to South Carolina, who's also 3 losses. And that's the only other team that, when you look at the schedules, South Carolina maybe would have an argument. They got Missouri, they got Clemson, so they got 2 at the moment ranked teams to finish with. They're not going to be in the SEC title picture. They'd be middle of the road, in the SEC, but they say, hey, we're peaking at the right moment. We beat Texas, we beat Missouri, we beat Clemson. With your losses to Ole Miss, Bama, and LSU, 2 of those really tight losses.
Absolutely.
So, that's the thing. It would be like extraordinarily 2 teams that I don't think would get that benefit,
yeah.
whereas Georgia and Alabama could. But I
Yeah.
don't see it.
It's just going to be crazy. It's one of those that, we're having this discussion now, but this might become more of a headache as the season goes along the next time we have this conversation. And I'm
See, I
just,
think the thing that is funny about this, Cade, I think it gets easier as we go on because I think some of these issues take care of itself.
and I agree
Penn
to that
States of the
extent.
world, the Indianas, the BYU's, the Tennessees, there's games left still on the schedule that will sort itself out.
Yeah, and I agree with that to an extent. It's just always, you never know when you're going to have a year like 2017 where you have the Auburn beats Georgia, and then Auburn gets, where Auburn roundabouts everybody else in the SEC, and you had that weird, okay, everyone beat everyone, thanks Auburn. And then it's just
Right.
like, what are we doing? Who is the real number one team? We don't know. And then that left a whole kind of what are we doing type of situation. But either way, Tyler, I do want to take a quick look at the bracket part of this thing as it stands. You look at what the 12 team bracket would look like so far. Your first round games, you'd have Boise State at Ohio State, you'd have Notre Dame at Tennessee, Ole Miss at Penn State, Alabama at Indiana, Miami, BYU, Texas, and Oregon would be your buys in order of lowest ranked seed to highest ranked there. But I mean, these would still be, and I said this last week, and I'm probably going to say this every week. These would be amazing matchups with maybe the exception of Ohio State, Boise State, just because of I don't know how much Ashton Jeanty can try to 1v11 Ohio State's defense. But either way, hey, if Boise was able to do it to Oregon, maybe they could do it to Ohio State. We'd have to see there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I don't think there'd be a game. I think regardless of how this shakes out, what people are going to enjoy about this is that no matter what, there's going to be a storyline for every single game, right? In the first round, where even the Boise States of the world, you're going to be able to make the case, hey, they have a shot potentially. Now, will that happen every year in this format? No, because I don't think in a usual year you see the depth that we're seeing this year, within the top 25. I think there's going to be some years in this format where you see, okay, there's clearly a top 6 teams or a top 4 or a top 8, and the back half of that might be a little rough. But, in a year like this where it seems like there is a lot of quality teams in America, this is going to be really fun.
Well, Tyler, the only counterpoint I have to that is I think, and I don't know how long this will go on, to be honest with you, but I think, as NIL continues to grow and develop, as that transfer portal, that window of opportunity continues to widen and widen, we might see more parity like this in college football.
Yeah.
And if that continues to happen, maybe one day, I know this is maybe going to ruffle some people's feathers who care more about, they'll say the purity of the sport. Maybe we can expand that playoff again down the road. Maybe we can get to 16. Maybe we can get to my ideal of 24, where every conference champion gets in. In an ideal world, it would look like the FCS or Division II or Division III playoffs. I'm just saying, Tyler. I'm just throwing that out there.
I think the FCS model is really good in that sense because it does give everybody a fair shot. Nobody's left out in that sense that you would, that you would legitimately make the case for. I guess what I'm trying to say. And if you aren't in the playoffs in the 2014 format, sorry about you.
Yeah,
it's kind of like
if you're
being the last team out in the NCAA tournament. It's like, well, maybe you should have been a little bit better.
Yeah, that's one of those. It's like, can you really complain if you're an 8-4, 7-5 team saying, "Hey, we should be in. We're the 24th best team in America." No, you're not. Be quiet.
Right.
I'd feel like you'd almost have to be like a little bit embarrassed to be having to make that argument. Unless you're like a Tulane or something where you're like, hey, we went 10-2, what gives, or something like that. But
or Louisiana, who might be 11-1 and not even ranked.
I know you're gonna have that question for everybody.
They're in the receiving votes.
They're
technically 27th in the country. They people.
There you go.
The coaches board.
There you go. See, this is why we need you to ask the committee about that. We need you to sneak into one of their press conferences and be like, what about the Cajuns? What about them?
Yeah, where's the Cajuns?
Why are they not a top 20 team? What gives? But folks, either way, as always, before we continue to ramble on for forever here, thank you for watching. We do sincerely always appreciate if you would be so kind to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to always be notified when new episodes come out, and to leave a comment down below. Is there anything you agree with what we said, disagree with? What's your opinion on the college football playoff rankings as they stand right now? What do you think's going to change as we continue to go into the future? All of that only takes maybe a minute or two of your day. It does not seem like a lot, but it really does mean a lot to us. Currently at 92 subscribers, trying to get to that triple-digit mark, hit 100 before the end of the year. It does mean a lot to us, and we do sincerely, appreciate any comments or likes or any of that we get.
Join the conversation, please.
Absolutely. We always encourage it because, well, we love talking college football with people. That's why we do this channel. But folks, as always, until next time, have a good one, everybody.